Hey guys, this is Heather at Homeschool Culture. In today's video, we're going to do a homeschool chat all about the teaching philosophies, homeschool philosophies. So I'm going to be going over the ones that we try to incorporate into our house. So I definitely consider ourselves an eclectic homeschool. So we pull from various different philosophies. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go over the philosophies we pull from, which one, like what do I specifically like from that philosophy, and then how I think that some of them really just kind of mesh well together. Okay, so again, we are an eclectic homeschool. The first one I'm going to discuss, and I do have my notes, is classical. So the classical approach is a very language-focused approach. It's not a visual at all. It is very based on information coming from written books, documents, things like that. And it's really broken into 3 stages. So you've heard of potentially the grammar stage, the logic stage, and the rhetoric stage. And that's, you can kind of break it into like elementary, middle school, and high school. I do want to preface this before I keep going. I am not an expert on any of these, meaning because I'm not a purist, I'm definitely not an expert on any of these. I'm just giving you a kind of a touch of what it is and then kind of what I pull from it. And so if it's something that sounds interesting, then you definitely want to dive deeper into it, because this video would be too long if I tried to go over every single one. So again, I'm just touching on what we pull from it, why we pull from it, things like that. The grammar stage, like I said, is more elementary years, the early years, and it really focuses on facts. And so like if you've heard of a company called Classical Conversations, they'll have like homeschool co-ops, and a lot of it is based not all of it, but a lot of it is based on song and music. So for instance, we use Classical Conversations when we're learning like our multiplications, because there's a multiplication song, and it just helps that rote memory work. And it's something that I value. That is one thing I definitely pull from the classical philosophy. I think that it is, it just helps those connections later on. So they might, even if it's learning, and that's why whenever you see me do memory work, especially in the past, and I still do it, like this year, we learned all of our states and capitals. We learned all of our presidents. That is memory work that would fall really under the classical philosophy, under the grammar stage. And so the reasoning behind it is to flood students, because their brains are like little sponges, which I totally think that is true. Your brains are like little sponges when you're little. That's why sometimes it's easier for them to memorize things than it is for mom to memorize it. And so, yes, flood them with just tons and tons of memory work, and then they can make those connections later on. For instance, if we're going through history and we bring up a president, my son, in his mind, he's sitting there going through the song, and he can kind of, figure out who was first, or who came before that president, who came after that president. Is there any connections that he can make to those 2 presidents, because he's learned about them in the past. The same with like your states and your capitals, or we've learned in the past, like when we were going over Europe, we learned all of the countries in Europe and their capitals and where they're located. Those are some of the things that I love about the classical approach, or the classical philosophy, is that grammar stage. And I do value the logic stage and the rhetoric stage as well. The logic stage would be when the student is ready for like abstract thought. So then the rhetoric phase really builds on the grammar and the logic phase. Like rote memory that they learned and facts from the grammar stage. And then more of those abstract teachings from the logic phase. And it's going to bring it all together, and it's going to make those connections so that they can actually express themselves with originality. So they're not just going and looking at a book and kind of copying facts down to do like a book report. They're actually bringing in information from various different places, making connections, and being able to create content like written expression, things like that, with what they consider originality. So some curriculum that would be included in that, like I already said, Classical Conversations, Classical Academic Press, Memoria Press, The Well-Trained Mind. Whenever I first started really researching classical philosophy, I bought the Well-Trained Mind book and just went into that, and it's an excellent book if that is something that you're interested in for your child. Okay, so the next one is unit study. First off, I think unit studies are great, especially if you have a large family, multiple age kids, because you can bring in one topic, so you can do a lot of read alouds and things like that, but then you can bring in different activities for those various ages. So I really do like unit study for that concept. Sometimes it's called a topic study or a theme study or thematic study. They're very hands-on, and of course literature-based, because a lot of times it's usually the homeschool mom or dad reading out loud to the kids. And again, and then doing hands-on activities after, like read alouds and things like that on whatever the topic is. And the topic can range from a big unit on the, like Revolutionary War, to something to like just bees, to snails, South America, whatever. It can range so much. And so I feel like we bring in unit study, especially when we do geography. Now, and this is why, because unit study is very cross-curricular. So sometimes I feel like I'm doing a unit study, but I'm really not. I really shouldn't call it a unit study, where it's just a topic that we're, I guess, going over as a group. It almost feels like a unit study because I'm pulling so many resources and stuff for. But really and truly, to be considered a unit study, it is going to be cross-curricular. So you're going to bring in, like if I was doing bees, you would bring in, obviously the science aspect of it, geography, how they migrate, things like that. You could bring in botany, what kind of plants they're attracted to. You could bring in history, so like maybe the history of beekeeping or something like that. The point of it is to bring in a whole lot of different areas, that's what the cross-curricular is, and incorporate but that one topic. I like the concept, but it is a lot of planning on the mom or dad's part, definitely a lot of planning. So that is why a lot of, I know a lot of us homeschoolers use, outside help for that, instead of trying to do it ourselves. But it also, the only thing I've ever found with unit study is sometimes, like if I go to purchase this one unit study on, let's just go with bees again, I'm probably not going to do even half of the stuff that is in there. And so that is because I don't do a lot of, if I'm going to do hands-on, it's going to be more like artwork, crafts, and less worksheet, like cut and paste, that type of stuff. And I know not all unit studies are like that, but some of them are. It seems like a lot are, because a lot of times whenever you're going to like these places online to buy these unit studies, they're trying to provide for a wide range of learning styles and things like that. And so I understand why they do it, but sometimes I feel like half of the stuff I get, I don't even use. And so I'm kind of getting away from unit study, and I'll explain why in a second. But I do like the concept, and I really like it for younger grades. I don't think there's anything wrong with cutting and pasting. Like if I'm dealing like with the 3 through 6, and those cutting skills and cutting straight lines and all that, I mean, that right there is part of their curriculum. That would be part of that cross-curricular to me. But when you get into the older grades, it just seems like busy work. And so again, it's definitely having to incorporate, in my opinion, multi-level activities. So like these kids are going to be doing this while these kids are doing this. And so it can be a lot, and it can be overwhelming. I do find value in unit studies, and I really do find value in the cross-curricular aspect, like I said before. And so how do I use unit study today? So I'm using unit study today, like with my geography. I'm going to do I still plan on doing this video. I haven't done it because I'm waiting for something to come in. Every year we do geography. This year we are doing South America, Antarctica, Central America, and the Caribbean. And so I'm going to be bringing in, of course, with our history, I'm going to bring in history when it's relevant. And it is obviously the geography we're doing the whole year, but I'm going to be bringing like in all types of aspects, biomes, animals, plants, of course, the geography, culture. It's just a wide variety. And so to me, that is kind of a unit study because again, it's cross-curricular and I'm pulling and bringing in all this stuff. So I think for sure, geography is a great way to use unit studies. Some curriculum for unit studies is the Konos. I did buy that one year. I know some people love it. Some people are like, it's okay. Again, lots of work on the parents' end. Of course, Etsy is a great resource. Of course, YouTube here. There's lots of YouTubers on here that share with how they do their unit studies. And then also there's bloggers. I think I feel like if I would have had if I would have had my kiddos closer together, and maybe I would have really seen the value of the unit study earlier on, I maybe would have done more of it. Now I feel like I don't even call it unit studies. Normally I call it like topic studies. I do value like, instead of like a textbook where you're like, okay, this topic, I do like taking a week or two. And I know units can be short. But sometimes I feel like for some reason I want to drag them out longer whenever I think of a unit study versus just because there's so much to entail. So I guess my advice on that would be is if you're going to do a unit study for the younger kiddos, of course, it can be very, very specific, but for the older kiddos, you might want to make it more broad and bring in stuff that way, just so, well, even though it's going to be cross-curricular, they can get a lot of different information from that unit study. All right, some other things for unit study to keep in mind. So unit study definitely is hands-on, literature-based. Sometimes it's done with notebooking, lap books, timelines, and like I said, it's very cross-curricular. Okay, the next one is the Waldorf. This is the one I probably know the least about, like collectively. There are Waldorf schools throughout the United States, maybe the world, I'm not sure about that. And it was created from an Austrian, I think back in like the 1920s. They emphasize art and imagination. His belief that an objective, intellectual, comprehensive, spiritual world exists and is accessible to all humans. Now, coming from a Christian background, when you start talking about spiritual stuff, it kind of throws me like, I don't know if I want to get into this. If you are doing Waldorf or you've heard of people that do Waldorf from a Christian's perspective, I would love to know that down below, because I could just be reading into that wrong, absolutely. But I'm not sure. So I've never really wanted to follow any of the actual curriculum. At one point, I went and I purchased all of these. These are called main lesson books. See how big it is? And the kind of the point is that the child is learning. When I say it's not, I wouldn't say it's unit study, but it's kind of similar in the sense of they learn about a specific, like let's say it's a specific time period, like ancient Egypt. So not just ancient times, but like ancient Egypt. And they really focus on ancient Egypt or ancient Greece. They'll study specifically within a mathematics concept or within a science concept, things like that. And they use these main lesson books. And not only do they write out information that they learned, but they also draw out information. And so like the teachers, like at the Waldorf schools, are very much, what's the word I'm looking for? They're very much trained on the art of teaching, how to draw and art and all that stuff. And so I think I like that aspect of it, because I think there is something to bring in, especially with certain subject areas. And so like if we're talking about geography, we're talking about, mountain regions and things like that, actually going in and drawing those things. I think that's great. I think that is very beneficial, as well as adding the written part of it. And so that is, like I said, I bought this years ago thinking I was going to jump in. And then the more research, I kind of just, I don't know, I felt like I just wasn't led to do it. And so I kind of took it back a little bit. But I'm thinking I'm going to kind of incorporate it this year with my son. And just take it slowly and just see what happens with it. I am definitely one of those in the philosophy of try it. And if it doesn't work, even if it's mid-year, then just kind of, taper it back and go a different route, especially with something as simple as how he's going to express what he learns. So again, I'm going to probably use this with my son's science and with geography. I don't know if I'm going to have my daughter do it with the geography portion or not. That's something that her and I can talk about. Her plate is pretty full when it comes to academics, and where he has more time in the day. And it's not necessarily that I want to fill it up. Again, I don't want busy work, but I think this actually will help just instill those concepts. So again, we're eclectic. I've talked about how we use classical, which is really where we pull from the grammar stage with memorizing that rote memory type memory work and facts. We pull from the unit study, where I do love that cross-curricular, and I think it's very, very beneficial for families with lots of kids. It just takes a lot of work on the mama's part. I want to love the Waldorf. I'm hoping I make it work this week, because I feel like I could see the benefit of a child coming in and not only writing out, what they've learned, but also drawing. And so that leads me into Charlotte Mason, which is funny because Charlotte Mason does that, right? And so I'm watching like this Pepper and Pine channel years ago, and I don't really think she puts anything else out anymore, but when she did, I loved her channel. And it looked very much almost like a unit study. Of course, they called it main lesson blocks. One of the ones I can remember is like ancient Egypt. And so she talked about all of these books that she read, and they were great living books. that Charlotte Mason would definitely think of and call living books. But then they would go in and then they would narrate. Essentially, they would narrate, right? And they would narrate by drawing what they learned as well as writing it out. I think the only difference is that sometimes with the drawing, one thing about the Waldorf that I didn't mention is that the teacher will have a main lesson book as well, especially in those beginning years, to kind of give the kiddos an idea of what they're actually looking for. Because if I just go draw something and go write something, my kid's gonna be like, what do you want me to do? But if I actually go in and I show him, okay, when I say draw something, let's think about what we just learned, the Machu Picchu or something like that. How can we draw that out and what can we write about it? And then, collectively we kind of do it together. So think about it like that. So that's how I kind of feel like, and I'm kind of jumping ahead of myself, but that's kind of how I feel like the unit study and the Charlotte Mason and all that kind of go together. Now, Charlotte Mason, if you've never read about it, is absolutely my favorite. Like it is, if someone said, Heather, you have to be a purist, you cannot be anything else, it would be Charlotte Mason. I love it. I think it is super beneficial for like even like a student that has a learning disability, a student that doesn't have a learning disability. I feel like it really works for all kiddos. Just some things to point out about Charlotte Mason. So Charlotte Mason believed that the child is a person and we must educate the whole person. So sometimes when we think about just like going to public school, when we go to public school, they're getting they're supposed to, right? They're getting an academic education and that's it. There's more to it than that. They should be having, habit training and character training, just how to work around the house, things like that. All of those things make up that whole person. And so it's not just, okay, here's math, here's English, here's science. There's so much more than that. And she believed that even the youngest kid deserved to learn it all. So it is definitely literature-based using living books. She made there was a concept in her books called spreading the feast, which I love. And so think about like at Thanksgiving dinner, right? And you have this spread and this big feast of food and it all looks delicious and you want to try it all. There's no way you could take massive portions of each thing at one time. And so what you're doing is you're getting a little bit of this and a little bit of this and a little bit of this, but over, a 12-year period or 13-year period, all of those little bits in that same content area build up to that big bit. So they incorporate things like poetry and Shakespeare, artist study, composer study, painting. It's very heavy on arts, history, sciences, geography, of course, math, of course, just reading great literature and how that, fiction and nonfiction. And so it really, I don't know, it is definitely because of spreading the feast, it is my favorite. Now that might seem super overwhelming to some people. And that's when like morning basket to me comes in handy. Because I can't, even if I only have one kiddo, so let's say my daughter's already graduated and it's just me and my son, we'll still call it morning basket. It'll be him and I one-on-one, and we'll do those things like poetry and artist study and composer study and things like that. And there's some years, like if you watch my video before, we're kind of taking off on composer and kind of going a different route. Still doing music, but just different. And they're not long. They're just little chunks of information at one time. So maybe 5 or 10 minutes for this, 5 or 10 minutes for that, 10 or 15 minutes for that. And over the whole school day for like elementary, I want to say like over elementary age, kids usually end by like 11:30, middle school kids usually end by 12. And I want to say high schoolers end like by 12:30 or 1:30, something like that. And so again, it's not like, oh my gosh, they have all this stuff and it takes all day long, because it doesn't. And it's because it's not a lot of busy work. And so you still go over, so like if I'm reading a book over Benjamin Franklin, then my kiddos are going to narrate what I read that day. So when you talk about narration is a huge aspect of Charlotte Mason, and it's one that I have used since obviously my second year of homeschooling, and still use today with both my daughter and my son. And so my daughter does a lot of it with history, with her literature. She used to with science, but this year and going into next year, it's going to be a lot of narration will be for history and literature. This age, it's written. For my son, it's going to be oral. And so like when we're going over science and we're talking about like the human organs, and we just did a whole reading on lungs and how the lungs work, then he is going to orally narrate back to me what he learned. And then that's it. I mean, sometimes we might do a puzzle, or we might do like a painting of it or something like that, but there's not worksheets, there's not anything like that. And I really value that. And that's one thing you're not wasting time on, again, what I feel like sometimes is busy work. You also, one of the best things I love, especially for your mamas out here that have kids that have, learning disabilities, you move on when the child is ready. We discussed whenever we talked about, if you watched any of my videos on dyslexia and things like that, we discussed on sometimes you keep moving on so that they don't get so far behind, and you give them resources that maybe back then they didn't think to do, but do seem to be beneficial. And so again, you're kind of having to take a little bit from here and a little bit from here to make it work with you and your child. So when I say that, just know that I'm thinking more like, okay, he is, about 10 years old. They say that that's when the child should start doing written narration. Not every single one for all day long, but at least one written narration a day. Well, my child at 10 might not be ready for that. And so we're not going to move on to the written narration until he's ready. But I'm going to continue giving him that great information in those living books, year after year, and he will continue doing like oral narration. You can still provide, and this is just something that kind of goes off of that, but you can still provide learning even if the child cannot read and write. And so you're talking about a younger kid or a kid with disabilities. They might not be able to read and write, but you are providing that knowledge to them because they're listening to you. And again, through that oral narration, they are telling you back what they learned. And there'll be times that, he didn't listen, or she didn't listen, my daughter. And so Charlotte Mason will say, don't go back and go over stuff. I don't agree with that. And so I will go back and highlight the points, but we do discuss how it is important to listen, why it's important to listen. And if you're not doing it this way, then we will, find other ways to do it so that I know that you're learning something. And that's my way of saying, you don't want busy work, so do it this way. And as of now, it still works for us. There's definitely no textbooks, no multiple choice test. They do have an exam week after, I think it's 12 weeks on, and then the 13th week is an exam week. They do have that. It's not, because of the way our homeschool flows, we don't really do exam weeks like that, but it's definitely something you can do. So I do want to say this real quick. Those of y'all that are thinking, well, that's not how school does it. And I'll talk about that here in a second when I talk about traditional schooling. I understand where you're coming from. But like for my daughter, I remember her going into, long story short, I put my daughter back into school twice. One was for a semester and one was for 8 weeks. The semester they did like, what are they called? STAR test here in Texas. STAR testing. So like the standardized test, they did a mid-year standardized test and she scored off the charts on reading. And it's because even though she's never done a test like that before, she can read and comprehend because she narrates, right? And the same applied when she went to 8th grade. She was able to, they have like these AR books where they'd have to go in and they'd have to read and then take these little tests, same kind of concept. And she always scored really high on those because she always, she knows how to read the book, pay attention to what she's reading because she knows she's going to have to narrate it to me, written or orally. And so it was just a little bit different by having to do multiple choice questions. The reason why I prefer written is because there's no guesswork, there's no guessing. So it's not like they guess the right answer, but also it's pulling information that and it allows those connections. So that stuff, she's in high school, but those things that she's memorized and she's learned and things like that from back in elementary, she can bring that into maybe what she just read currently and make a connection that a multiple choice test would never even talk about. And so that is why I love, which also, and I don't think necessarily classical and Charlotte Mason are the same, but they do have similarities. And I think that's kind of a similarity. It is definitely the one I love the most. I think I already said that, but I want to say it again. Okay, so before moving on, some curriculum for Charlotte Mason. First off, if you are thinking, I really want to hear more about the Charlotte Mason, if you go to Amble's site online, well, first off, if you look, there's podcasts. I think there's something called the Charlotte Mason podcast. If I can remember, I will put it down below. If not, just ask me and I will definitely pin a comment to it. But there are podcasts that talk about it, that really kind of break down each little, aspect of the Charlotte Mason philosophy. She has a series of 6 books that you can read through. And again, remember, it's not just academic. So when you're reading through it, you have to remember it comes from a standpoint of the whole person. There's something called the Charlotte Mason Companion Book, which kind of like gets the nitty gritty and kind of puts it in one book. That was great. Again, there's tons of podcasts and YouTube videos. Amble's site online is one of the curriculums that I have used in the past. It is not I go purchase this curriculum. It is something that is already laid out. It has all the books for every year, for every subject, and then you go and purchase the book. Some of the books, and not from them, like it'll tell you to go to Amazon or whatever. Some of the books are like out of print or old, and so it will be something that you actually just pull up and can, read from the screen, which isn't ideal for everybody, but like if cost is an issue, because it can get expensive when you're trying to buy them all, then that's a way to do it. And then also, remember your library might have some of them. And then also, anytime you look for books, always go to like Thrift Books or the Facebook Marketplace because you can buy and use there. Okay, so that is Ambleside Online. And, I meant to say this. So Ambleside Online not only has like the curriculum aspect, but it has tons and tons further information of just kind of breaking down, like what is narration, what is artist study, what is et cetera, et cetera. There's another program called Simply Charlotte Mason, which you've probably heard of. She has great YouTube videos describing and talking about stuff, as well as a blog. And that is they give you an actual step-by-step, this is, curriculum and and you can purchase the actual books and all of that from them. So that's like a curriculum book. So like, this day you do this, on this day you do this. And then you can actually buy the books and everything from them as well. And then A Gentle Feast. And I know very little about A Gentle Feast, but a friend of mine did it and she really, really enjoyed it and valued it. So that's another one to look into. Kind of going back into just some highlights of Charlotte Mason. Even your young kids should be exposed to great music, literature, Shakespeare's history. Oh, another thing about this is you really, the morning basket or whatever, spreading the feast can be done all together at one time. And you always read up. So like if you see in Charlotte Mason, Simply Charlotte Mason, there's your book that you're going to read for ancient Egypt. This book for grade 1 through 3, a different one for grade 4 through 6, and a different one through 7 through 12. You would always pick the 7 through 12 book and you would read, because you're always going to read to the older child, and the other ones are still going to benefit from it. So that's just something to think about as well, that you can get pretty much everything done, maybe besides math. You can pretty much get everything done besides, unless you have some other independent work at one setting with multiple age kids. Another concept that I like about it. It is, there's short, quick lessons. I already said that. I love spreading the feast. I love the fact that there's always great literature. So if you're like, I don't know what my kids should read, there's tons and tons of book lists out there for Charlotte Mason. I love the narration aspect of it. I like that it's Christ-centered. So she was definitely a Christian lady, and you can see that all through her writing. And I love that she wanted to train up the whole person. So not just those academics, but habit training, character, just, daily living, things like that. And I love Charlotte Mason. But Charlotte Mason definitely wouldn't be doing math facts, singing a song about math facts or the presidents and things like that. And so that is where you just kind of pick and choose what you want and make it your own and make it, what you think is best for your child. Okay. The last one I'm going to talk about real quick, and that is traditional school. Of course, that's going to look like your public school. So if you went to public school, it's going to look like that. You're going to have textbooks. You're going to have standardized tests, potentially. You're going to have regular tests. After each unit, after each chapter, there's a test, and there's a unit test, and then, a semester test, and all that type of stuff. Here is why we still do it. Like, we're doing it definitely for our math and our science, because she's using the Dive, Dr. Shorman's Dive Science and Dive Math. She did it this school year, and she's going to be doing it next because I really like it. And because it's going to be the most similar, in my opinion, to what she's going to see in college. So at this point, she hasn't really she hasn't had to go in and study this amount of work for a science unit and then take this type of test. And so I want her to be able to have that and see that. I think if she didn't, I can guarantee she probably would have been okay if she didn't. But I still wanted her to be able to see that. So those are the two subjects that we definitely do more traditional school, is our math and for high school science. Oh, okay, and I will say this, and then writing. I think when you talk about writing within Charlotte Mason, it's a lot less, like your writing should look like this, 5 paragraphs and this, and there's a thesis and blah, blah, blah. And I totally agree that I think that a person should be able to get their writing out and express it. Again, that kind of that originality of the classical talked about. But like when you go take an SAT and ACT, they are looking for a specific type. Or if you go take your college exam, entrance exam, for like a junior college, they're looking for a specific type. When you're in your Comp 1 class, they might be looking for a specific type of writing. And so that follows more of that type of pattern writing. And so I don't think there's anything wrong with just exposing them to that, and so that they can see that, because there are going to be sometimes expectations that we have to do it this way because someone else is grading it, essentially. Okay, the reason why we do more traditional school at the high school level is definitely because of exposure. I don't really think, I'm trying to think if there's anything that we really do. For my son, for English, what is it, Easy Grammar? Yeah, Easy Grammar. I would say Easy Grammar is probably more traditional, and we don't necessarily use it that way. So that's another thing. You can take a more traditional curriculum and kind of make it work for you, even in like a Charlotte Mason way. Like for instance, for me, that would probably, if there's anything out there, grammar is probably the one that I would need the most help with in regards to teaching. And so I wanted something that was I needed to reteach myself, right? I needed to reteach myself a lot of the concepts. And so after kind of looking at the Simply Charlotte Mason's English lessons, I could potentially buy theirs, but I think I understand Charlotte Mason's English now enough that I probably could just take kind of what I have and just kind of adapt it to more of a Charlotte Mason philosophy English grammar. So if that's something that you'd be interested in video-wise, let me know, and I will do a video on that, just because I don't want to have to go buy something else when I already have like 2 more years, or actually like, yes, 2.5 more years worth of grammar already available. I don't want to have to go, purchase more stuff. So, all right, so that is it. I hope y'all enjoyed it. I know it's kind of a longer video, but I kind of wanted to show y'all why do I call myself eclectic? What does that mean when I say I'm an eclectic homeschool? And again, there are way more actual philosophies out there, like Montessori and I'm missing something else. Thomas Jefferson. There's another one I can't think of. Anyways, unschooling is one. So there's tons of other philosophies out there that I didn't hit on because we don't necessarily bring that into our homeschools. So I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you got something out of it. I definitely, if any of those intrigue you, then definitely just look them up. Well-Trained Mind for classical. Unit study, you could probably find information online. Waldorf, I don't know. Again, I'm kind of just iffy on Waldorf. Like I love the thought process of bringing the artistic side into, but again, it's almost like I'm using the main lesson book, but making it also Charlotte Mason. Because to me, I feel like Charlotte Mason does the same thing. I mean, she talks about if a child can't narrate, give them paper and pencil, or give them crayons or something like that for them to draw it out. Obviously it has to be appropriate for the content, but so I don't know. So I like that. I like the concept of the main lesson blocks of Waldorf, which again, I think pulls from Charlotte Mason and unit study. Like, and when I say pulls, like not that he stole it from them, but like, I feel like they all just kind of intertwine a little bit more than some people don't want to say that. Like they're like, no, it's very different. But I do think that they kind of intertwine more so. And then again, like, and when you're talking, and I'm talking about like upper elementary and high school. When you're talking about elementary, like lower elementary and like preschool ages, then that even brings in more information that I'm obviously haven't discussed today. So if you have those younger kiddos, then definitely look into Montessori. And again, with the Waldorf, I like the art and the imagination. They use very natural resources for toys and things like that. So, okay, I'm going to drop it because I could talk about this forever. I hope you have a super blessed day and a blessed week. If you have any questions or comments, please leave those down below because I love hearing from y'all, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.